Hi, my name is Kalina Grabb, and I am a 2023 Knauss Fellow in NOAA Ocean Acidification Program Office. I'm one of the coordinators of Lunch and Learn series, and here we highlight Knauss Fellows' prior research, current work, and other relevant experiences. So feel free to check out prior recordings along with this one, which will be on YouTube afterwards. So this series today will highlight the experience in the field of 5 different 2023 Sea Grant Knauss Fellows in the style of lightning talks. So we will highlight Colette Fletcher-Hoppe, Claire Huang, Demarcus Robinson, Hannah Staley, and Sarah Tucker. And these fellows will share with you their experience engaging with science, community members, and partners in the field. So I will be introducing each speaker along the way, and then we'll do questions at the end. So first up, as you can see on the screen, is Colette Fletcher-Hoppe. Colette is a 2023 Knauss Fellow and a PhD candidate in biology at the University of Southern California in Los Angeles. As an offshore wind technology specialist, her Knauss Fellowship focuses on integrating the electrical grid with renewable resources and offshore wind operations and maintenance. Her PhD research focuses on the structure and function of marine microbial communities such as bacteria, viruses, and single-celled plants and animals that make up the bottom of the marine food web. So take it away, Colette.
All right, thank you, Kalina. Are you able to hear me and can you see my slides?
Yes.
Great, okay. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for joining and for the Lunch and Learn Committee for hosting us. As Kalina said, my name is Colette Fletcher-Hoppe. I'm excited to be here today. Throughout the course of Adventure September, the Lightning talks about travel through the Knauss Fellowship. You'll probably hear a lot about marine adventures from some of the other panelists who have some beautiful slides to share with you about their adventures offshore. But I'm going to be talking about a slightly different track. As Kalina mentioned, my Knauss placement had me in the Wind Energy Technologies Office of the Department of Energy. So today I'm going to share with you a little bit about what I've learned about the DOE National Labs. The tie-in to marine conservation, which is the focus of the Knauss Fellowship, is that, of course, climate change is a big threat to our world's oceans. Due to climate change and the emission of fossil fuels into our atmosphere, the oceans are getting warmer. Sea surface temperature has been rising over the past 50 years, which increases ocean acidification and marine deoxygenation, which is a big threat to marine life globally. And due to the fact that this results from the consumption of fossil fuels, we are well aware that we need to start shifting more to renewable energy. So this pie chart here depicts the energy budget of 2021, broken down by its source. And you can see the majority of energy used in the United States came from petrochemicals like coal, natural gas, and petroleum. And about 12% came from renewable energy. Of that, almost a third came from wind energy. So in 2021, wind energy comprised about 3.2% of the total energy used in the United States. And we know that we need to increase that percentage in order to have a greener, more environmentally friendly planet. In recent years, offshore wind has been hailed as a really great potential for some of these wind energy resources to power our country. So that is because it has consistent high-speed wind resources. This map here shows the average wind speed across the United States, both oceanside and continental, with the bluer colors indicating higher wind speed. And you can see that there are a lot of really high winds off the coast of California, the Atlantic, and the Gulf of Mexico as well. So due to this available wind resource, the Biden administration has set an ambitious goal of producing 30 gigawatts of offshore wind by the year 2030. And in order to aid that goal, the Department of Energy runs 17 national labs across the country who focus on making renewable energy a greater part of our energy security. So these national labs conduct a lot of research that would be a big financial risk to industries. In other words, they conduct the kind of research that a company could lose a lot of money doing, with the goal of lowering the cost of renewable energy and coming up with recommendations for best practices that industries could adhere to. And I got the opportunity to travel to the National Renewable Energy Laboratory in Colorado back in April. And so NREL, the National Renewable Energy Lab, focuses on a number of challenges to integrating renewable energy, particularly integrating new renewables with America's electrical grid. So this is essentially the practice of making sure that power sources such as offshore wind are connected to the electrical grid of the states, and consumers can access that electricity that is generated. So there are a number of challenges with grid integration that NREL studies address. The first is that the impacts of offshore wind cable array are unclear. And so to look at that, the NREL team is focusing on an Atlantic offshore wind transmission study and action plan. I'll talk about that a little bit more. Also, wind is a variable and uncertain resource, and NREL is using a controllable grid interface to address some of these challenges. And third, transmission capacity of an electrical source decreases with distance from that source. So how can we make offshore wind more accessible to people that live farther inland? One potential solution is using wind power to generate hydrogen gas, and I'll talk about that a little bit more as well. So the first challenge, the impacts of offshore wind cable array, is being addressed by this Atlantic offshore wind transmission study. And essentially, our NREL team is finding that essentially coming up with an offshore power strip for offshore wind farms could really be more efficient in terms of cost, reliability, resilience, and would result in fewer environmental disturbances. So the current state of the practice right now is that each offshore wind farm has its own array of transmission cables connecting back to shore, which is customized for each individual offshore wind farm. But this results in a lot of cables connecting to the land, which could have greater environmental disturbances and could be more costly. So our NREL study is recommending that we essentially build out a power strip connecting states to one another and to the offshore wind farms. So this recommendation came out recently in the Atlantic Offshore Wind Transmission Action Plan that was published on Tuesday, and we have a more scientifically focused study coming out soon. The next challenge that NREL addresses is the challenge of wind being a variable and uncertain resource. So in order to address that, they have built this wonderful campus out on Flatirons, Colorado, and this is a schematic of the campus here. So to reiterate the challenge a little bit more, our current electrical grid relies on the consistent production of energy through the burning of fossil fuels. That's constant, it's happening at a constant rate, and it really stands in contrast to wind, which can change quite dramatically with weather, as can other renewable energy resources. So in order to address that, NREL has built out a controllable grid interface, or CGI, where researchers are able to simulate a real-world grid environment, including disturbances due to natural disasters and the incorporation of renewable resources, which vary quite a lot in intensity and power. So, of course, connected to this CGI, they have some renewable resources like solar panels, a photovoltaic array, which has attracted some celebrities in recent years. And in order to address the challenge of getting wind power to locations that are farther away from shore, they're studying cogeneration, so using wind power to produce hydrogen gas, as you can see depicted here. And of course, importantly, they have wind turbines connected to this controller grid interface as well. And this brings me to the real highlight of my trip, which is that I had the opportunity to climb up one of these towers with my DOE team. So this is us, we're 80 meters off the ground, 240 feet up, and a 1.5 megawatt turbine. And it was an amazing experience. We had beautiful clear views of the Rocky Mountains behind us. We got to see up inside the head of the turbine here, which is called the nacelle. We got to see the rotors and the gears and the underpinnings of the generation from this turbine, and some beautiful views and beautiful pictures as well. So with that, I can conclude my presentation. I want to say thank you to the Knauss Fellowship and to the DOE for giving me this opportunity to travel. Thank you to the Lunch and Learn Committee for providing me the opportunity to talk about it, and thank you for your attention. And I'll just conclude by hoping that my presentation blew you away and I wasn't too long-winded here. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Colette. That was a wonderful presentation, and I love the jokes at the end. So next up, we have Claire Huang. And Claire is a Sea Grant Knauss Fellow and a Policy and Communications Specialist with NOAA's National Centers for Coastal Ocean Science. She holds a Master's of Environmental Management from Duke University and a BA in Ecology and Evolutionary Biology from Columbia University. Her research is in conservation and fisheries science, spans everything from river herring habitat restoration and fish passage to bottlenose dolphin population genetics. Previously, Claire worked in environmental law and international marine conservation NGOs. She is passionate about advancing environmental protection and climate justice by leveraging science, policy, and legal advocacy tools in partnership with communities. So, Claire, go ahead.
Thanks so much for the introduction, Kalina. I don't know if I can really follow up Colette's puns there, but I'm really happy to be here with everyone to share some of my adventures as a Knauss Fellow. As Kalina mentioned, I'm a fellow with the National Centers for Coastal Ocean Science, or NCOS. And the two adventures that I want to share with everyone today really focus on NOAA's involvement with restoration science and what restoration really looks like in action in the field. So for those who might not be as familiar with NCOS, we are a program office with NOAA's National Ocean Service. And our program's office, our mission is really to provide science, products, services, and research to support communities and managers in managing marine resources and stewardship of environmental resources. So our science really spans across all of the topics that you see on the screen. And it's been really exciting being a part of NCOS as a Knauss Fellow, and as a scientist working in policy, because I really get to work with the scientists who are doing the on-the-ground work, be able to translate that science and integrate it into policies and management priorities, but then also on the flip side, be involved in the field work and really get to see those issues on a first-hand basis, doing that work on the ground as well. So back in June, I had this awesome opportunity to go out on a NOAA research expedition with some of our scientists. This was a project that was part of the Deepwater Horizon spill, Gulf spill restoration. NOAA has been really involved in the response to the Gulf spill that happened back in 2010. And part of that work has been in this portfolio studying the mesophotic and deep benthic communities. So the image that you see on the right has actually been taken by one of the previous NOAA cruises. And mesophotic and deep benthic communities describe these super diverse coral deep sea habitats that host, fish communities, invertebrates, all sorts of sponges and corals, and they really form the basis of food webs in the Gulf of Mexico. A lot of these benthic communities were harmed during the Gulf spill, and so NOAA has been conducting annual cruises to assess the status of these habitats and also think about what restoration and conservation actions are needed to really restore them. So this was my first time going on an offshore research expedition, which was really exciting. We left the port of Pascagoula in Mississippi. That's me with the NOAA ship Pisces. We were at sea for 14 days in total, and we had several important activities that were happening on board. So the first one was to conduct high resolution seafloor mapping with multi-beam sonar. And this is a method of basically scanning the seafloor, identifying features, and also measuring depth. And you can see on the map on the right here that I made for the mission, all of these tracks are basically the ship moving over the study area, and scientists like to call it lawn mowing, mowing the seafloor, because that way the sonar is able to cover that entire area of the sea, and you get a map of that area. So after creating a map of the seafloor features that we're interested in, we worked with Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute scientists who had an automated vehicle that is able to actually pre-program to go down into areas of interest and create even more high resolution scans and images of those seafloor habitats. And that produces the basis of data for ground truthing and habitat modeling of those MBDC communities. And finally, we also conducted environmental DNA sampling. And this is a method of basically using biological samples and looking at eDNA to characterize the biological community and the biodiversity of those communities. So like I mentioned, this was my first time on board a ship of this size. So I was definitely a little bit seasick at first, but I got over it pretty quickly and was able to really participate and help out with a lot of the daily science operations. So you can see in this video that included, deploying the instruments, checking the data. And another one of my important roles on board was also to serve as the content collection lead and lead a lot of the outreach. So as you may know, the Deepwater Horizon spill is a pretty high profile event that happened, and it's really important for NOAA to share out with the public the research that we're doing and the results of all of the activities that are going on annually. So I was able to put together a lot of this footage into this video that we shared on social media. It's sort of a day in the life of a scientist at sea. So it was really exciting for me to be on board with this role because it kind of meant I got to stick my nose into a lot of the activities. I would have my little gimbal and camera and be like, oh, what are you up to? So here are some more pictures of me participating in some of the science activities like deploying sensors, talking to the bridge with the radio and giving some instructions, and then also some of the outreach tweets that I wrote for the mission, again, sharing information about what the research has been up to. I'm also working on a podcast with NCOS's podcast leads right now. So once that is ready, I'm sure you'll see it on NOAA's website. Now I want to take us from the Gulf of Mexico, our nice little tropical scene, to the eastern shore of Maryland, where I was actually just on this trip last week. So this seminar is so timely. And now we're moving into a totally different scale of restoration that's happening on the ground. So what you're seeing here is Poplar Island in Maryland. And this is a project that NOAA is working on in conjunction with the Army Corps of Engineers and Fish and Wildlife as part of a program called Engineering with Nature. So some quick background about Poplar Island. This was a naturally occurring island in the Chesapeake Bay, but this island actually lost 99% of its landmass due to erosion. So that's the picture that you see here from 1997. That is the only part of the island that was left at that point. The state recognized the importance of natural habitat and the ecosystem values of the islands in the Chesapeake Bay. So they provided funding and worked with the Army Corps of Engineers and with state agencies to basically rebuild this island from scratch. And this is a super cool project that's been decades in the works. They used dredge materials from the Baltimore Harbor actually to rebuild the island. And so this is the satellite image of what this island looks like today. You can see there are multiple different types of marsh cells with low-lying marshes and also some upland habitat. And there's an area here that also has some rocky reef features that mimic more of like the deeper bay ecosystems. So NCOS was pulled into this project. Again, like I mentioned before, our office offers a lot of science and research services to help managers. And so we are joining on a project to basically help managers and the engineers assess how this island is actually functioning as wildlife habitat. To do that, we're using a method called telemetry, which studies animal movements. And our office is specifically working on a project looking at fish use of this island. So some questions we're interested in asking are, for example, what parts of the cells are the fish swimming to? Are they yearly residents, or do they kind of like bounce in and out of Poplar Island and then leave after a while? And with telemetry, we're able to answer a lot of these questions. And the island is really set up as, an ideal experiment where it was restored from scratch. There are also a lot of nearby natural marshes to serve as control sites for it. So on this field trip that I was on last week, I got to help in the entire process of working on this telemetry project. So the first step here, you can see I'm working with one of my colleagues, and we set out gill nets to basically try to catch fish. That's the first step. We did a bunch of different methods. We had crab traps, eel pots, we used gill nets, and just good old hook and line fishing as well. And once we catch the fish, we're able to surgically implant passive transmitters into individuals. And these tags basically have a unique ID on them so that once they're in the fish, we're able to track this fish as it moves around the marsh. And the research team back in May had actually put receivers throughout the different marsh areas, and these receivers would basically pick up the ping of any of our little tagged friends swimming by and say, oh, fish number 825 had swam by at 10 a.m. this morning. And so we're able to collect a lot of data from this very passive acoustic monitoring of all of the movements and habitat use for the fish species. So here are some more pictures of me, releasing someone a little fish that just went through surgery. And then in this image, we're actually collecting some of the data from the acoustic receivers from the last time that they were put out. So now our team is working on analyzing this data, and hopefully, again, the data would be able to inform a lot of the engineers of the marsh to show them, what types of features are most useful as fish habitat, and can really inform the future of restoration actions in the Chesapeake Bay. So with that, I will leave you with this beautiful sunset photo from the Gulf of Mexico. Thank you again to the Lunch and Learn Committee for hosting this. Thank you to my host office, NCOS, for giving me these amazing opportunities to go out in the field. And a special shout out to Tim Batista and Matt Kendall for really taking me under their wing on both of these trips. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire, for sharing with us. And next up, I will introduce the next speaker, DeMarcus Robinson, who is a Knauss Fellow from the California Sea Grant Program, and he is currently working in the White House Council on Environmental Quality. He is also a PhD candidate at UCLA in the Atmospheric and Oceanic Science Department. So go ahead, DeMarcus.
Hey, how's it going? So thank you for the welcome. My name is DeMarcus Robinson. I'm glad to be here today. So unlike everybody else that's on this panel, my field work is not connected to my office. So this summer, for a course of a couple weeks, I was able to be on a research vessel, part of my PhD, to kind of go out there and conduct research in the Santa Barbara Basin. So I'll be talking pretty much all about that. And so I'm excited to tell you guys about it being in the submarine Alvin and also on the research vessel Atlantis. So this happened in June or July of this year, and I was out at sea for about 3 or 4 weeks on the research vessel Atlantis, and we were trying to just understand the biogeochemistry feedbacks in the Santa Barbara Basin. So for this presentation, it's less science, but more describing what it's like to be on a research vessel and all the things that comes that's a part of that. And so boarding the research vessel Atlantis is operated out of Woods Hole. And so when you're going and preparing for a research cruise, one of the things you have to do is prepare your laboratory space. So you take everything that's in your lab and you pack it up on the U-Haul and you drive it down. You load everything on the ship. And so these are 2 research labs that we have for doing various water column measurements, from DNA extraction to doing any type of chlorophyll measurements and other chemical analysis. This is the lab that I was mostly in. So this part of the study was a water column and seafloor type of study. So this is the seafloor lab where we're doing a lot of sediment, microbiology, sediment, geochemistry to understand the characteristics of the Santa Barbara Basin. And so boom, we're setting sail, we're leaving San Diego on our way to the Santa Barbara Basin. I think it took us about an hour or 2 just to get out there. And as we're traveling out there, we started doing these various safety tasks. And so if you ever put on a wetsuit, this is probably 10 times worse in a good way. So these immersion suits are there so that just in case something happens on the boat, you can pretty much protect yourself if you have to be out in the ocean. And so you have to put these on, you gotta make sure that fits. And so it takes a couple times, but once you gotta get on there, you're good to go. So the image to your left is the team, and that's me to the right about to go out and do some sampling. And so people always ask, like, what do you even eat on a boat? That's a good question, because I think outside of that, you probably think like the meals will be nasty, but actually the meals are really great. It's like going to your favorite restaurant and you having pretty much every type of meal out there. And so there's an inside joke as we're on the ship, is that there's this seasoning called Stap Your Mama. If you like food like me, definitely add this to your catalog of seasoning and spices. But this is kind of the running joke as we were eating every day at lunch, and lunch was usually around like 11 o'clock. And so when we're finished with lunch, we're really actually going out into the field, and we're actually, well, not the field, the ship, and we're actually starting to deploy things and put things together. So here is an image of us really deploying these, getting ready to deploy these benthic flux chambers I'll talk about in a second. And so usually the timing that happens, at least for our research crews, and this kind of varies with different research cruises, is that there's a time that you wake up, start deploying, there's a time where you go to sleep. So my wake up time was 6 a.m. because we had to put these chambers on these big elevators that I'll show you in a second. And the deployment of the elevators had to happen at 7:30 because we had to put the ROV Alvin into the ocean at 8 a.m. And then we had to recover it by 3 o'clock. One thing is that once Alvin's in the ocean, you can't deploy anything else. So you have this weird downtime. Usually in that downtime, you're doing lab work and things like that. And so then we recover Alvin around 3 o'clock and recover these chambers around 6 o'clock. And so that's kind of the time interval that was happening on a day-by-day basis. And so this is the chamber. One thing that's really cool about this chamber is that it pretty much measures the fluxes going in and out the seafloor. So these are fluxes of chemicals like iron and nitrates and things of that nature. And you're able to measure it with these syringes that go off at different intervals. It sucks up the water around it, and then you're able to measure the chemicals on the ship. And so this is the elevator I was talking about. The elevator is this contraption to hold the chambers, and so you deploy it down using a crane, and then when it's time for it to come back up, there's a switch that is clicked, and because of these buoyancy little cylinders, it just floats automatically to the top, and you just take the wrench, you just take it off the seafloor. And so we also had AUV Sentry, which is an autonomous water vehicle that is pre-programmed, and it goes out and does surveys, and it also takes photos and things like that. And so next I will talk about my time in Alvin. Alvin's a submarine that is married to Atlantis, so you can't take the submarine and put it on another ship. It has to stay on Atlantis. And so this is kind of the inside of the submarine. If you actually take your hands and you just kind of put them all the way out, extend them, that's probably about the size of the submarine, give or take probably 1 or 2 feet. So you're really cramped in there, and it's a 3-man sub, and the only person that has a seat is the captain or the pilot. The other 2 scientists on the ends, we're kind of laying down the entire time. So there's really no seats, and it's not comfortable, but once you get to where you're trying to get to, it's all worth it at the end. And so during this, they actually go through various training and safety precautions just to let you know, like, if something happens, this is how you get to the surface, this is how you communicate with the ship. And so this is me getting done with my first dive, went down to 560 meters, gave me a certificate. It was a great time. And so this is a video of just deploying, how Alvin is deployed into the seafloor, to the water. And it's a pretty cool process to see. Woke up early every morning just to see this. Like I said, this happens at 8 o'clock in the morning. You have 2 divers that's on top just to communicate with the person that's on dock and also the ship, just to make sure everything is good and everything is safe. And so, like, what did you see down there, DeMarcus? So I'll tell you. So this is one of the weird things that I saw. I always tell people that I saw a tree in the middle of the ocean, and I can never explain it, but this is a picture of it. And so going out, there's nothing, there's just all you see is the seafloor and microbes, and then you just see this tree that's erected. So one thing about California, we ever get a lot of mudslides, so this is probably some of the reasons why we saw this tree that's out of nowhere that was there. And so the chambers I was telling you about, we deploy them on the seafloor, we leave them there for 24 hours, and after we're finished, the arms of Alvin would come and collect it and put it back on the elevator and then sends it back to the surface. We also did some push core measurements with these push cores that you see at the bottom. And so what does the ship see? So as this is happening, they're seeing these kind of dots on the screen. They're seeing where we're deploying different instruments in different places. They're also seeing where Alvin is as transiting throughout the ocean. And so after you're done, one of the cool traditions you do, you get sprayed with water. So that was my tradition. It was pretty cool. It's fun. And some of the things that we found was like these large microbes called Vegetato. They form these microbial mats. And under a microscope, this is what they look like. You can see them with your eyes. They're like little thin hairs, and they're pretty great because they oxidize hydrogen sulfide with nitrate in the water column. And so this is what the team, this is the science team. It was really great, and it was a cool experience. And thank you for listening. Thank you to Lunch and Learn for having me to be here, and looking forward to everybody else's presentations.
Thank you, DeMarcus, for sharing that. Looks like an awesome experience on Alvin. So next up, I would like to introduce Hannah Staley. Hannah holds a Master's of Environmental Science and Master's of Public Affairs from Indiana University, along with a Bachelor's in Marine Science from Coastal Carolina University. She is currently a Sea Grant Knauss Fellow through the Indiana-Illinois Sea Grant. As a legislative affairs specialist with NOAA's Office of Marine and Aviation Operations, her Knauss Fellowship involves reviewing and analyzing new bills, attending various briefings, providing insight on marine and aircraft operations to congressional members and staff, assisting with internal reports, and staffing OMAO leadership. So go ahead, Hannah.
Great, thank you, Kalina. I really appreciate that introduction. And as she mentioned, I am a Knauss Fellow working within NOAA's Office of Marine and Aviation Operations. And I'm sure you guys could probably all guess that I have essentially no limit to the field experience opportunities with working with the main operations hub within NOAA. I was originally going to just talk about my experience on NOAA ship Nancy Foster. However, I actually just had the opportunity a few weeks ago to go fly into Hurricane Idalia with the hurricane hunters, and I just felt like it'd be a disservice to all of you if I did not also share that experience. So with that said, let's get into it. So back in May, I traveled to the Caribbean. I joined the Nancy Foster for their coral reef mapping project just right off of the coast of the Virgin Islands, as you can see in the video here in the corner. This was my first ever time out at sea on a ship. It was a really amazing experience. And it was even better when I found out that I would actually be seeing land while I was out there for 2 weeks. And what was really awesome about my role on the ship, I actually didn't have like a specific role or duty. And my main role on the ship was just to observe and learn and absorb everything that I could, which was actually, in my opinion, the best job I could have had. And I saw a lot and learned so much. So similar to DeMarcus, we also used ROV, so remote operated vehicle, and you can actually see in this video us deploying the ROV. We were mapping a coral reef about 55 meters deep, which is about 180 feet on the seafloor. And what was actually really awesome to me, and this might just have been me being naive, but I didn't realize how projects actually are continuously ongoing throughout the entire time you're out at sea. So this was a 24-hour project. So at night, we actually had scientists who would be mapping the seafloor, and all of this mapping and that data actually informed where we would do the ROV dive during the day. And it was a really fun atmosphere to be in, because you had people, starting their shift at midnight or 3 a.m. or like me getting up at 6 a.m. just in time for breakfast and to start the day for the ROV dive. And once we deploy the ROV, we would get everything together, take all of our life jackets off, our helmets off, and run into the lab, which is what you actually see on the left here. And it was actually us basically watching TV essentially. And this was definitely my favorite version of television, because we actually got to see real time what was happening on the seafloor. And the dives were they ranged from about 1 to 3 hours, depending on what was expected or to be down there. And when we had the dives going on, you had, which it may be a little hard to see in the camera or in the picture, but to the left, we had the ROV driver who was navigating the ROV down over the corals. And then you also have the lead scientist who was observing all of what we were seeing, and he would record things such as making notes of like sandy areas versus more like hard surface areas, or even sometimes, unfortunately, we would just see a lot of sponges rather than coral that we were hoping to see. So he would make note of that, and then also take pictures in similar or the same duration. So say like every 45 seconds, a new picture would be taken, and then all of this data goes back to essentially help us understand the conditions of the coral reefs in the Caribbean. This is really important, especially, in my opinion, to track the conditions of the coral reefs, especially over time, in this time of climate change, where they are significantly negatively impacted from ocean acidification, rising sea levels, as well as increasing ocean temperatures. So this is a really awesome project to be a part of. I studied coral reefs, in the classroom in different research projects, but this provided me with a whole new perspective and admiration for these environments and what the researchers do at NOAA. And what was kind of side note, since I was an observer on the ship, I was taken in, by the scientists. I became a part of the ROV deployment team, as you can see in the video. And then I also had the opportunity to speak with the engineers, go into like the engineer room, and then also talk with the NOAA Corps officers who are the main people who operate the ship and navigate it. And it was actually really cool because while I was out there, I even tested my driving skills. And I already had respect for scientists and RV drivers as well as NOAA Corps officers who were operating the ship, but I gained even more respect when I was humbled while trying to drive both the ship and the ROV, as you can see in these pictures. Not as easy as it looks, and just have so much admiration for both of them. So I am gonna switch gears here. As I mentioned, I actually flew into literally just a few weeks ago into Hurricane Idalia out in the Gulf of Mexico. And I went up on a P-3 aircraft known as NOAA 42 or Miss Piggy, and was able to learn again from NOAA Corps officers, so the pilots of the NOAA Corps who operated the plane, as well as the scientists who were collecting the data and the engineers as well. Similar to the ship, the pilots actually made a plan and had a route ready to go before we even left the ground, before we even went into the hurricane and started the mission. So while we were up there, there was a specific route that we were taking, and when they're collecting data, they use this technology called drop songs. It's the data that was collected is actually in this video to the right. You can see the real time. So it's exactly how it sounds. It's this little thing that they release from the aircraft, and it just goes through the hurricane and collects data on temperature, humidity, pressure, as well as wind. And it was really amazing to see that data collected at different elevations through the hurricane while it was going down to the ocean. And they did this in different spots. And this data that's collected is actually what informs, say, coastal managers or decision makers on what to do for their communities when this hurricane would hit the land. So it's very, very vital and very important. And once again, I have so much admiration for all of these people who go out and complete these missions, both out at sea and in the air, and was really grateful for the opportunity to go up and observe these missions firsthand, because I do believe, when you're working at HQ and you making these decisions, it is really important to have that ground level experience and observations to have the entire piece of the puzzle. And yeah, I'm just really grateful for OMAO, and thank you for listening today. And I look forward to any questions that you guys might have in a little bit.
Thank you, Hannah, for sharing your ship and plane adventures. So next up and last on the list, we have Sarah Tucker. Sarah is an Arctic Research and Communications Knauss Fellow through the University of Hawaii Sea Grant Program. She is working in NOAA's Global Ocean Monitoring and Observing Program. She holds a BA in Biological Sciences from Smith College and a PhD in Marine Biology from the University of Hawaii at Manoa. So go ahead, Sarah.
Thanks, Kalina, and hello, everybody. As Kalina mentioned, my name is Sarah Tucker, and I am a Knauss Fellow through the Hawaii Sea Grant Program, placed at NOAA's Global Ocean Monitoring Observing Program. I am an Arctic and Communications Fellow, and I also get to sit on the Secretariat of the Interagency Arctic Research Policy Committee. I'm a marine microbiologist by training, so I'm really excited about how we can use ocean observations and genetic tools to understand the roles that microbes are playing in our ocean. Recently, I had a really awesome opportunity to be out on a research cruise that was focused on building capacity for early career polar oceanographers to lead research expeditions as a chief scientist. So this is a chief scientist training cruise that was supported by NSF and UNOLS and the Arctic Icebreaker Coordinating Committee. So chief scientists are the ones that are leading the research program. They are often coordinating across scientists with the captain and crew, maintaining the safety and health of cruise members, and also keeping the scientific mission on track. And from my knowledge, this is the first time that a chief scientist training cruise has been focused on Arctic environments. And this was an application-based program. So folks applied to be part of this research cruise and this amazing training experience. So here we are out on the water and celebrating Pride Month. The cruise happened in June. We were led by Lori Juranic and Emily Edom. And the cohort was predominantly early career professors, so in their first couple of years, as well as postdocs and graduate students. And we came from a variety of backgrounds, some more coastal focused, some more open ocean focused, with expertise in the physical, the chemical, and the biological oceanographic expertise. The cruise was held on the RV Sikuliaq, which means young ice, and this is an NSF ship that's operated by the University of Alaska Fairbanks. It is an ice-capable ship, which means it can break ice up to 2.5 feet thick. And it's a really impressive place to do science. There's lots of laboratory space, lots of sampling equipment, and the captain, crew, and scientists are very knowledgeable and really, really helpful. So our cruise was from Seward, Alaska, down here, up through the Aleutians to Nome, Alaska. And you can see there are different sampling stations along the way presented on the map. And we, as a cohort of chief scientists in training, decided this entire cruise plan. We had an idea of when we needed to leave Seward and when we needed to be in Nome, but everything else was up to us and based off of our different scientific interests. So we sampled water at different locations using this crane here, and you can see here the Niskin bottles and the CTD. So you can send down the CTD to different depths and it'll collect water and bring that back up to the surface for different measurements. We also were coring for sediments. So you can see on the right-hand side, someone who's evaluating the different colors that they found within the sediments. We did plankton tows. Some of the samples from the plankton tows are on the bottom picture. And we did other sorts of biological, chemical, and physical measurements, including taking temperature and salinity, as well as Van Veen grabs, and we even got to deploy a glider. So a really amazing scientific program that we as chief scientists in training got to develop ourselves. Personally, I spent most of my time filtering seawater for marine microorganisms. That is my area of interest, and I'll actually have the opportunity to continue to do some DNA sequencing analyses on this with 2 other participants on the cruise. So this is a collaboration that started through the training program, which is really exciting and fun. And I will say that the cohort on this cruise were amazing. We had a really great dynamic, and it was a really positive learning space. So most of the time we actually spent training to be chief scientists, learning what the communication, what the responsibility, what the leadership that goes into being chief scientist really is. And we had sessions for training prior to the cruise and while on the cruise. So some of the things that we've talked about were prioritizing research objectives, how to manage collaborations, how to communicate with the captain and crew, and how to communicate with local communities. In fact, we had a community observer on board named Lloyd Pitcock, who was conducting wildlife observations to make sure that we weren't interfering with subsistence hunting. He helped us send daily emails to local communities to let the communities know what we're up to and when we're going to be there. And he also shared his knowledge of the local environment, which was a really nice exchange. He also took many of these awesome photos. So I want to thank Lloyd and John Farrell for sharing these photos with me and so that I could share them with you all. So some of the other more ship-based training sessions that we had, where we learned about the CTD and its controls. So that's that crane that goes down and collects all the seawater and also takes measurements of salinity and temperature and density of the water. We also learned what it would be like to do an ice station. So that's when you're taking and putting scientists out onto the ice, and they're often drilling or taking samples from the ice. And we learned about the systems that collect data underway. So as the ship is transiting, there's also some underway data that can be collected, whether it's PCO2 or nutrients, salinity, temperature. We learned about the winch systems, which allow you to put objects over the side of the boat. And we also learned how to submit requests for time on research vessels and write cruise reports. Perhaps one of the best experiences, for me at least, was actually being co-chief scientist for the day. So here's what we call the Board of Lies. We call it the Board of Lies because it often gets updated so frequently that if you look at it once and don't look at it again for another few hours, it might change. So it might feel like a lie. This board is updated throughout the day based on the weather, the operations, and the safety and the needs of the ship. It's pretty much a schedule for the day, and it's actually video casted throughout the ship on monitors, as well as through the network, so that you can always go and check it. And the night before you start your chief scientist position, we went up to the captain and were able to develop a schedule and figure out what time we might expect some activities based off of how fast we're going, based on the weather, and based on the needs of the science program. So the day I was chief scientist, we had a really awesome science program. We had 2 sampling stations. We also got to deploy a glider. And I felt it was really important because we were doing so much work and staying up quite late, as Hannah mentioned, that we also have a nap. So as chief scientist, making sure that you're taking care of your people is a really important part of it. Checking in, seeing how they're doing, seeing how the science is going, but also seeing how people are getting along, how they're feeling. And perhaps the most surprising aspect, I think, of being chief scientist for the day was the need to have really clear communication and frequent communication. And this isn't just with the science party. This is across the ship with deckhands and the captain and different members of the crew. And in addition to that, it's decision making. You know, the weather goes foul. You have to make a decision on what scientific activities you might have to cut. And those decisions often come up really quickly. So while I was on the ship, I was really aware of how my work as a Knauss Fellow had started to change how I was regarding research cruises and research. My office is the Global Ocean Monitoring Observing Program. And so we're responsible for coordinating, supporting, strategizing when and where and how ocean data is being collected. And that really helps us understand the ocean and improve our models and understand how it's changing. So we're doing a lot of managing of ship-based research. I also support the IARPIC Field Operations Community of Practice, where we work across agencies to provide guidance on best practices, summarize all the marine research expeditions in Alaska and the Arctic, and communicate out to local communities, among other activities. And during my fellowship as a Knauss, I have learned so much about the amount of effort it takes to just get a boat in the water and to keep these research expeditions going. I feel like I have a greater appreciation for just being able to start the expedition and for maintaining these research platforms. I also have a better understanding of the impacts that research expeditions can have on local communities and the necessary work that goes into trying to minimize these impacts and improve communications between scientists and communities. And finally, I think perhaps because I'm involved with strategic planning for Arctic research, the science while I was on the ship actually had a greater sense of urgency, an urgency that I had never felt before while being out in the field. And this is really exciting to me because to me, it says that I'm more passionate about something that I already really love. So I want to thank Lloyd Hickok and John Farrell for all their photos and for everyone listening today, and to my office and NSF and UNOLS for letting me join this experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Go ahead and stop sharing your screen. And Knauss Fellows, please rejoin us with your webcams. Wonderful. So thank you all for these really inspiring presentations about your experiences in the field this past year. It's just so much fun to learn about what you're doing when you're not in your offices. And so we're going to take the next, let's say, 10 minutes to answer audience questions. And as a reminder to the audience, please type your questions in the questions chat box, which is located in the control panel. And please make sure to let us know if you're addressing a particular person. So I want to start by first, Colette, you've gotten a lot of love for your puns, so thank you for starting off with some humor. But the first question that came in was for Claire, and it says, Claire, neat experiences. For the Poplar Island project, assuming sea level rise will continue to impact/erode the island, do you know how much sea level rise it will withstand, or how many years into the future it is anticipated to exist?
Yeah, thanks for that question. That is a really, really great question. And that is actually one of the sort of the goals of restoring Poplar Island, is also for the co-benefits of coastal resiliency and shoreline protection, in addition to improving wildlife habitat and recreational opportunities for the area. I don't have the details on, from the restoration side, how sea level rise might impact, or how they account for sea level rise in the restoration activities and designing the island. But I'm sure that I would be able to help you find some resources to learn more about that. I think I left my email in the presentation, and the NOAA seminar folks can also get that to you. So I'm happy to follow up with some more information for you.
Thank you so much. This is a question for basically anyone in the group who wants to answer it. It says, how have these field experiences influenced you as you approach your job back in the office? If somebody wants to take that on.
I mean, I could start this off. I feel like something before I actually went out on NOAA ship Nancy Foster, one thing that I felt like was missing was actually seeing the operations of these ships and these projects going on. I work every day on these projects in the office, but I had been out to see it. And I actually felt like it was just the last piece of the puzzle that was missing to get the whole, perspective and idea of what was going on to inform decisions here at HQ, and actually envision what was happening while out at sea or on a hurricane hunter, and just again seeing the data that comes through and the work that these people put into it at the ground level, which is really awesome.
Thank you. Did anyone else want to add to that? No? Well, we have a similar question that asks, did you know ahead of time that field work would be involved with your placement office? Or was it more of a, here's an opportunity, do you want to go situation? I had no idea Knauss Fellows had fieldwork opportunities. These presentations are neat. Anyone want to take that one on? Did any of you, did you know about this in advance? How much you would be out there in the field?
I can try to answer that first. I definitely expressed to my office pretty early on that I was interested in gaining field experiences. I went through grad school, sadly, during and overlapping with the COVID shutdown, so I wasn't able to actually do as much field work in grad school as I'd like. So being in an office that's focused on science with a lot of on-the-ground science, I had mentioned early on that I was really interested in these experiences, and then made the connections with different colleagues across my office to maintain those connections and to gain access to a lot of the field experiences. So yeah, it was definitely something that I was interested in the beginning, that my office, was very flexible and accommodating, and they were very supportive of those experiences. So I'm really grateful to them for that.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me because I know 3 of you are at NOAA and then 2 of you are not. And so I'm actually kind of interested in some, your experience is on land, and then you've got lots of ships going on there. And I don't want to pick on anybody, but I'm curious about like how your experiences reflect maybe the office that you work for. And some of you are very direct about that, but I'd be curious to hear about that.
I mean, I'm happy to comment on that. Not that the question was directed or anything, but I didn't understand before being placed at the Department of Energy just how much travel is required in the position. There's a stipulation that DOE supervisors and grants managers will go to visit their grantees, I think specifically at the national labs at least once per year. So that adds up to a lot of travel. This is a trip that was already planned just to check up on the status of NREL and their activities and what they had been doing. And so I was essentially invited to tag along somewhat at the last minute after I had already gotten my placement. So I wasn't aware that I would have the opportunity before placing at the DOE, but now I can understand that it is a really big part of the work that those people do.
Thank you. Yeah, it is really fascinating to see. I imagine you guys in headquarters, but clearly I was wrong. All right, well, it looks like that was our last question. So thank you so much for joining us today. I'd like to conclude by just expressing my appreciation for this Knauss cohort for 2023. You guys have been amazing this year, really showcasing your work, your master's degrees as well. And I want to thank Kalina. Thank you for these fantastic introductions and hopping in and out of the webinar. And of course, to the Knauss Lunch and Learn Committee for organizing this series and making sure your work is out there. So we hope you will join us again at library seminars. Our next Knauss webinar will be on October 19th. So join us then. And meanwhile, everyone have a wonderful day. Thank you.